The Brother Moon's markers do some fairly repugnant things to humans in an effort to trick surviving humans into their brutal demise. Whether that be a slasher playing dead, an exploder talking and babbling, the wall guardian screams of pain inflicting psychological distress, or the pack members composed purely out of children, not to mention the other various forms that they can take on, they all exist in some shape or form that activates the deepest and most instinctual parts of our brain, causing great distress. Understanding human psychology is something that the markers are intimately intertwined with, considering they arguably are our creators in the Dead Space universe. One such mental attack that would absolutely break procreating humans is the Crawler. This particular necromorph exists simply to lull anyone into a false sense of security and override their sense of self-preservation by taking the form of an infant. So with that set up, let's dive into the lore and morphology of the Crawler from Dead Space and understand what has befallen this newborn. As I get older and approach dad age, while having no kids of my own, I can understand how brutal of a creature this is. During a point when a human is most vulnerable to the world and completely at the mercy of the others around it, the marker takes advantage of this stage of life, turning the infant into a vile form of necromorph that plays on humans' natural instincts to protect young at all cost. The Crawler maintains many of its newborn traits with some very clear alterations, making it quite dangerous to any person it gets close to. These traits kept can easily trick a mother, or even father for that matter, into getting close enough for the Crawler to begin its attack. But how dangerous is it exactly? So I figured I would start out with the psychology on this one first and foremost, as the creature's main attack is actually fairly weak from afar, but absolutely devastating as it gets close. But for it to get close, it must first trick the person. As seen when entering the school, a mother has clearly found her child, or at least what she thinks is her child. Allowing the necromorph to get close enough, the creature detonates, sending the mother flying in all directions, more than likely becoming the corruption in the process. The marker probably has a pretty good understanding that human minds get wires crossed when it comes to babies and children. Innately, in a normal, healthy brain, we are told to protect children even in situations where the child might not even be ours. This is actually one of the better traits of our species, at least that's what I believe. Anyhow, we are hardwired to react to babies to crying and are driven to find out what, if anything, is wrong. Don't think that exists in you? Well, here's something you might not know. I'll provide you with two examples. The first is a cat's meow. Do you love cats like I do? Well, cats actually mimic a baby's cry when they meow at you. This is a call to action whether you know it or not. So, you end up feeding the cat, slowly but surely turning it into a heckin' chonker. The cat manipulates human instincts to get fed and lived a hefty, overweight life of leisure. The second way is probably a little more known to you. Ever go to a horror movie and that weird nail on the violin noise makes your hair stand up and induces a little bit of anxiety in you? This is actually mimicking the frequency at which babies cry. This induces a stress response in you as if a baby is being attacked or injured, causing you to feel on edge as you can't identify what the actual threat is. So, sight and noises basically control you. Maybe not the most mind-blowing fact, but these signals are put off by the Crawler, allowing it to psychologically alter you whether you intend to allow it or not. The Crawler has an ability to tap into the most basic instincts of a parent, and maybe even those around it who are not parents, but really are just of age to have kids. Completely formed from one body of a newborn birthed on Tideman Station, when the outbreak hit, these completely defenseless babies would have been more than likely the first to go, but probably not in the way you might think. When a baby first comes into contact with the world, its immune system is rather weak, relying on the mother's milk to receive antibodies to bolster its immune system. Without these immunities, they are open to attacks by microbes. Also, just wanted to throw this in there as something that I thought was kind of a cool side note. Space actually has a massive effect on our immune systems. In space, it is known that our immunities are actually quite lower. We are not certain why this is the case at this point, but all we know is that astronauts who have been to space for some time have experienced a decrease in the system's effectiveness. Anyhow, why am I telling you this? It's clear to me that the culmination of all these factors led to the infants being attacked. It all goes back to that yellow bacteria which the markers use to infect humans. You may have noticed during the Exploder episode, I mentioned that those who are immunocompromised may actually become exploders. Well, infants are extremely immunocompromised, not to mention, considering this particular station, while having artificial gravity, I did notice in part of the game, you do run across something about a 0G bed, which means the body would be exposed to microgravity. This could mean that the mother's immunocompromised to a degree as well, leading to less antibodies transferred. But this is all just conjecture based on the events seen in game. What should be known is that the babies are not able to fight off bacteria as well. In adult humans, it seems our immune system is able to effectively combat this bacteria in low doses and exposure as long as the body is functional. To be expected, in babies, this is not possible. The necromorphs likely do not have have to do anything when they happen upon the babies in the nursery. However, the bacteria clearly is present in this area. In fact, this is supported by the game, or really alluded to, because at certain points you can overhear the speaker overhead as it states that colds and germs spread fast in space. This is true. Due to close contact with adults, children, and other infants, this bacteria more than likely began to bypass a newborn's immune system, turning them quickly into what we see, possibly even well before the actual outbreak began. This idea does seem to hold some water as far as I'm concerned, for the reason that A, when you reach a certain part of the school, an infector can be seen running by, meaning that the bacteria is present in large quantities, more than likely stemming from this infector, but also B, the newborns are exploders. As seen in the specialized version of the adult Necromorph known as the Exploder, this collection of yellow bacteria exists in volatile quantities. I know we have discussed the exploders before in detail in my previous episode, but I did want to bring one more thing to your attention. During my Weezer episode, I hypothesized that the bacteria may be creating methanol as a byproduct to change the atmosphere. This holds concerning the exploders as well. I thought maybe it was a form of natural hydrogen production, but methanol is perfectly viable as a fuel source and does have explosive properties as well. If the bacteria exists in mass quantities in the body of the newborn, this is entirely possible where it gets its coloring and ability to detonate. So, what changes has the infection caused for these newborns? Some pretty horrible ones, if I do say so myself. There was an uproar last time I started with the hands, so it seems that y'all really do prefer me starting with the feet. So, I think we all learned something about ourselves today. Anyways, so starting with the feet, it appears that the legs have been fused. This fusion has yielded what almost appears to be like a tail on the back of the newborn. These legs are still primarily its main form of locomotion. Just like with its original form, the creature can really only crawl to its location, and even then it is quite unsteady. Moving up to the abdomen and chest region, we see that the yellow bacteria has congregated in this area the most. So much so, in fact, that it has distended the back to becoming a complete Quasimodo hump. The spine in this area is still somewhat visible. This would suggest that the spine is no longer in its original S shape, probably more like a C shape. More than likely, the muscle and internal organs are being used as a fuel source for the bacteria to produce the methanol. This swelling has left the skin extremely thin in this area, with many blood vessels leading across the infected area. The arms of the crawler are still in their natural form. However, the crawler will no longer use its hands to crawl. Instead, it will use its entire forearm as a point of contact. Moving further down the arm, we come to its hands. The fingers are either damaged, or the skin of the hand seems to have progressed up through the fingers. This has created a more foot-like appendage at the end of the forearm, perhaps providing some sort of increased stability. Speaking of stability, let's discuss its musculature for a moment. The muscles of an infant are minimal, and the nervous system in the area has very weak connections controlling this muscle. Due to this being the case, whenever the crawler moves, it will tumble and fall. The weak muscles seem to be less coordinated than in older humans and thus older Necromorph. Overall, the baby will move in a caterpillar-like fashion to get to where it needs to go. Something we may not be able to see on this baby but has to be there is the thing that allows it to actually get onto walls. It could be suction by the legs that allows it to stick, but honestly, that's the only thing I could see being the case. I seriously doubt this thing has got like Spider-Man hairs coming out of its hands and legs. The head of the baby is the stuff of nightmares. A gray dead face is twisted around 180 degrees so that it faces up when it crawls. This allows for the creature to see as it crawls, otherwise its face would be looking down at the ground. And considering it uses its forearms as a flat surface in which to crawl upon, its face would be incredibly close to the ground, limiting its eyesight. A baby's neck is incredibly fragile anyhow, so it would not take that much to cause this twisting. The head also appears to be larger than that of a normal infant, leading to increased weight, perhaps allowing it to twist like this originally. Pretty brutal. One of the more disturbing facts about the crawler is that the brain may be completely intact during this. Much like that of the exploders, talking, or the wall guardians screaming, they seem to make human noises despite being another creature entirely. Now, the argument could be made that this is because they possess human vocal cords, but here's my counter with the crawler. First, when the baby crawls to the mother just before detonation, it is heard laughing. As far as I know, necromorphs typically do not laugh. Another indication that maybe this thing is still somewhat human is upon entering a certain room, a crawler can be seen laying on the ground. However, it is just sitting there cooing like a baby normally does. These actions should be noted as a waste of time normally by the Outbreak standards. And my final point is that the head is completely intact, and the way that the head is actually twisted around so that the baby can see means that the optic nerve would still need to be intact and transferring information to the occipital lobe in the baby's brain, which means you would still need an intact brain. So it's possible that the marker allows the brain to maintain some actions, which in turn would lure humans in or allow it to hunt much better. Again, pretty brutal. Crawlers are exceedingly easy to take out. Basically, just like a regular newborn. If you throw something at it at 50 miles per hour, it probably will knock its head off. Wow, that was pretty morbid. Anyways, usually the head is the first thing to fall off as it is very poorly attached to the frame of the body, considering it's at 180 degrees, of course. Again, this creature cannot do much damage from afar, but get too close with low health and this necro will send Isaac flying backwards with a few limbs missing to boot. So that about wraps up the crawler. It exists just to screw with adults and take out as many as possible. I hope you guys enjoyed the video over its lore, morphology, and possible beginnings. If you did enjoy it, I think we all know the drill by now. Drop a like as it helps me get into the algorithm. And if you are new, subbing is a great way to keep up with the channel. I am still posting all my live streams on Roanoke streaming, so check that out. It's in the description if you are interested in watching live streams. Like I said, I'll post a link there. Also, I will drop my Twitter, Discord, and Patreon links if you're interested in supporting the channel. And speaking of Patreon, I would like to thank mine. At the scientist tier, we have Arulam Lupe. Then, what's up? It's Artyom Chornich. And last but not least, it's Not a Spoon. Our residents are A. Laurantis, Greater Genes 83, Oz Hickman, and Richard Muhlenberg. Next up with their PhD in genetics, we have Allison Caspero, Andrew Lawson, Divine Whisper, Laffy No Skill, and Steve N. Next up with their masters in biology, we have Adam Hartswick, Brendan Brotherton, Cameron Smith, Edgy McGee, John Russo, Scott Grant, The Rin of Lies, and The Otterman. And last but not least, with their bachelors in morphological sciences, we have Ahigao Comics, Alex the Gun Guy, Anthony Charles West, Anthony Wolf, Captain Gasmask, Dustin Ellis, Eric Scott Gillies, Gems, Molten Tarts, Professor Bennett's, Riot, Russell McBride, and the original Fat Ass. That name gets me every time. Thank you guys for your continued support. Also, I am streaming Resident Evil 2 Remake currently, so if y'all want to see that, keep an eye out for it. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see y'all in the next one.